We continue the notion not only to give you an additional facet of what the assessment, the experiences, the lessons learned, or the proposed process forward is to deal with the issues of violence, but in this first plenary session of the afternoon is to bring to you a description, a life experience of a development course of a new program that many of us had heard about when it was in development, which is Justice Counts and is being run by CSG. Ben Shelor is the Deputy Program Manager for the Council of State Governments. And we've gotten to know each other in the recent past, and not only do some of our paths have crossed, but the types of work that we used to do either at the state and local governments, the organizations that provided these type of services, or most importantly, supporting the justice community are one and the same. Ben himself provides technical assistance to state criminal justice agencies through the analysis of policy, procedure, research, operational, and logistical support. To me, that is the soup and nuts of what agencies need support on from the state and local levels. He was a former Deputy Director of Standards and Accreditation for the American Correctional Association, and he received his BA in Justice from the School of Public Affairs. I say that last one in the sense that connotes and makes me think of how new and rich Ben is to the community, for us to speak about his quals and the relevance that he brings to this table. To that end, Ben, I'm going to invite you up. I'm going to look forward to your discussion about Justice Counts, and I'm going to ask you some questions, if you don't mind, in the future.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As Maria said, I'm Ben Shelor. I'm a Deputy Program Director here at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. That's me. Whoever was doing our lighting that day needs to be fired. We'll address that later. All right. I'm excited this afternoon to talk to you about a new program called Justice Counts. Justice Counts effectively exists to provide policymakers with more and better and more actionable criminal justice data, which, based on the discussion this morning and knowing the membership in this room and in many conversations with Maria, with Bob, and with Alex and with others with IGES, I know is a vision that you all certainly share. So Justice Counts is a federally funded initiative. It is funded by BJA. You heard Director Levine earlier today talk about BJA having the big bucks. This is the product of some of those big bucks. So I'm going to talk quickly about a number of components of the project this afternoon. So first, who we are. Secondly, the problem that Justice Counts addresses. Thirdly, how we're doing it. And then we'll open it for questions and discussion within the room here. So who we are. So, as Maria noted, Justice Counts is co-run by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the Council of State Governments Justice Center. It is directed by a 26-member National Steering Committee. These are folks from all across the criminal justice spectrum and from more than 20 states across the country. This is police chiefs, sheriffs, corrections administrators, probation and parole administrators, judges, pretrial experts, and legislators, folks from governor's offices, many others who have a key role in directing public policy and in utilizing data to craft public policy, specifically that around criminal justice. I will note that Director Carlton Moore of the Bureau of Justice Assistance is a former member of the National Steering Committee in his previous role as the state administering agent for the state of Ohio. So we benefit from Director Moore's experience, again, both in his current role and in his past role. There are 21 project partners on Justice Counts. So you'll see a list of organizations here. 14 of those 21 are national association partners representing, again, the kind of scope and depth and breadth of the criminal justice system. I heard reference this morning to the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which is a partner on Justice Counts, the National Sheriff's Association, the American Jail Association, the National Center for State Courts. I will not name all 14 of them. But those association partners really help us to better understand and leverage the knowledge and the subject matter expertise across the system in doing what we set out to do. We have a number of research and technology partners as well. Our primary technology partner is Recidiviz. For those unfamiliar with Recidiviz, they are a group out of the Bay Area, primarily former Google and Microsoft engineers who have decided to use their time and talents for good. So they help us build databases and other technology platforms that I will talk about a little bit later on. We also have a number of other research and technical assistance providers, the RAND Corporation, Measures for Justice, the Justice Management Institute, CNA, and many others. Again, I won't read the entirety of the list here, but a good amount of our time is spent working with these 21 national partners to advance the project. So the problem that Justice Counts addresses. I'm not going to belabor this portion of the presentation because we heard a lot about this morning, and again, I know this is a problem with which folks in this room are intimately familiar. In short, there's very little access to timely criminal justice data for the public and for policymakers. So again, those in this room know how much data exists at the agency level. There is a ton in many cases, but very little of that data is analyzed or presented in a timely way or in a regular way or in a way that is actually useful for most policymakers. When we work in a number of different states and localities on various projects that we do here at the Council of State Governments Justice Center, we're often told how little of this information makes it the way of legislators or governor's office in a regular, with a regular cadence or in a consistent way. So that's one of the challenges that we set out to address here. So policymakers lack even basic data on criminal justice to inform their decisions. I'd say if you asked the majority of state legislators how many people are in jail in their state, hopefully they are able to tell you the difference between prison and jail, although at times I'm not optimistic. Most of them would not know. Those data belong to counties and localities, and they are not reported to the state. Sometimes they're collected either by a state agency or via a national survey, but that is often dated. And so basic data like how many people are arrested, how many people are in jail, how many people reoffend are often very difficult to come by for state and local leaders. And then finally, those decisions have lasting effects on everything from public safety to disparate impact. So again, we know that folks in this room are heavily oriented towards public safety, and rightfully so. It is difficult to administer agencies that have direct impact on public safety unless you understand the data that they collect and how those data are utilized and leveraged in policy decisions. We talked this morning also, Director Levine in particular, about the disparate impact of folks in the, of the criminal justice system on populations of color. Obviously very interested in those dynamics through Justice Counts as well. So how we're doing it is fourfold. So the first is generating consensus-driven criminal justice metrics, and I'll talk a little bit about the metrics and the metrics development process momentarily. Secondly is deploying a suite of tools and resources to share those metrics. And then thirdly is supporting states and agencies in implementing the Justice Counts framework. And finally, supporting states and agencies in using those metrics to make policy decisions. So generating consensus-driven criminal justice metrics. It's very difficult to create a project like this and pursue a project like this unless there's general agreement around what it is that we're trying to measure and those metrics that we want to help agencies provide to policymakers. So to do that, we established 7 different subcommittees, each dedicated to a certain component of the criminal justice system. We call those sectors. Those sectors were law enforcement, prosecution, defense, courts and pretrial, jails, prisons, and community supervision. Again, that does not cover the entirety of the criminal justice system. I think there are distinct components, hopefully, that align broadly with those 7 sectors, but generally speaking, those are the areas that we chose to focus on and around which to design metrics. So that forms one side of what you'll see shortly as a matrix for the Justice Counts metrics. The other axis of that matrix is these 6 categories, and they are capacity and costs, population movements, operations and dynamics, public safety, equity, and fairness. Now, many PhDs in the room and many others would tell you that these are very difficult things to try to measure, to try to define. We wholeheartedly agree with that. But I think there are certain components of each of these that we can utilize data that's already collected by a vast number of agencies to start to paint a picture for state and local leaders of how these various categories impact their criminal justice system. So capacity and cost seeks to basically answer how large or expansive is our system and how much are we spending. Population movements is effectively ins and outs, so think about admissions and releases in a correctional context. You can also think about other dynamics in other categories that would, this is the initiation of a case, this is the disposal of a case, that type of thing. So how many people are encountering, entering, or leaving the system at various points? Operations and dynamics, so this is what's happening to individuals or cases within that particular sector of the system. Public safety is how is each area of the system affecting or contributing to public safety. Equity is, again, about how the system is treating people similarly or differently by ethnicity or gender. And fairness is about accountability and treating people fairly. So what that resulted in is the identification and designation of a set of metrics that you see here in this matrix. Again, if you looked at, for example, population movements, you can look at population movements for law enforcement, for defense, for the prison system, et cetera, or you can look across a given sector and look at capacity and costs for jails, operation dynamics for jails, equity, et cetera. So this is where we landed for what we call our Tier 1 metrics. We call them Tier 1 because there are other tiers forthcoming, Tier 2 and probably Tier 3 as well. Really what we wanted to identify and pursue in the Tier 1 metrics was data points that met a dual test. So one is utility. Is this information useful and necessary for policymakers to have on a fairly regular basis? And the other is feasibility. Are these data points that are collected by the majority of agencies operating in that area of the system? The feasibility component spoke to a lot of what we've heard earlier today, particularly around small or rural agencies that either do not have on-site data capacity or may contract for a data system or may need to rely on outside capacity or knowledge in order to collect and supply data. So those are the metrics, and they really form kind of the foundation for justice counts and for the other components of the project, the second of which is the suite of tools and resources to help states and agencies share those metrics. So the metrics in and of themselves are helpful, but they have the most utility when they are actually shared with policymakers on a consistent way. And we developed platforms to help do that. So what you see here is the platform, again, that was built for us by one of our project partners, Recidiviz. It includes the metrics for a given area. These are examples only. And what you can see here is the cloud-based database, which is, again, what they have built. They did that for security reasons, for scalability reasons. It is an open source database that they have built, so agencies have the ability or states have the ability to utilize that in whichever way they see fit. There are flexible ways to enter and upload data, including options to automate data transfers. I will be the first to tell you I am not a technology person. I am a policy person through and through, so we are more than happy to talk about those automation options and how those would work with case management systems or record management systems, and I'm happy to connect folks with other members of our team who have far more expertise in the mechanics of that transfer. And then we want this to be accessible to all justice counts reporting entities. So here is an example, again, of what we have built. This allows for agencies to kind of toggle on and off which metrics they want to report. For example, if an agency can report arrests, that one's on, as is reported crime, annual budget, total police officers. This is obviously for the law enforcement metrics. But you'll see calls for service and use of force incidents have been toggled off there. That would be because that agency either doesn't collect those data or is not comfortable reporting those data or whatever the case may be. So an agency can participate, but they don't necessarily have to be able to supply data for all of the various metrics within that area of the system. This is a suggested definition and suggested date range for the admissions metric. So here we have, as you can see, a fairly prescriptive suggested definition for how admissions are counted. Again, suggested being the key word there. We want to offer agencies flexibility as their definitions may or may not align with this. These definitions were built in conjunction with the members of the issue-specific subcommittees who have expertise and experience from myriad different agencies across the country, and so we think that they are fairly useful and straightforward in terms of how they ask agencies to count these things. It will default to this definition and this methodology, but it also allows participating agencies to effectively override that, to customize the methodology and to attach to the data the definition that they are using. A good example here is use of force. For example, we know agency use of force definitions differ significantly, and you would be fraught to compare uses of force against between agencies that define those things differently. So this is an example of the portal that agencies would use to supply these data into the Justice Counts database. It provides some examples here and some fairly straightforward questions about what's included, for example, here in staffing, as well as a timeline. So data sharing allows agencies to decide what they can and can't support. The infrastructure allows agencies to define how their metric is calculated. So again, this is about overriding the default definition. We want to encourage as many agencies as possible to utilize that standardized definition so that we can compare between agencies, but again, didn't want that to be the barrier to agency participation. And there is metadata attached to all of the data that include those definitions, for example, so they cannot be decoupled or taken out of context. We heard a lot this morning about how important context is and knowing the context for various data points, and that's something certainly that we take very seriously through Justice Counts. So this is an example of a visualization that would be the result of the Justice Counts database. So here we see a readmission rate, over time changes, the number, raw numbers of readmissions. And again, this is oriented towards helping policymakers and the public understand what these data are, what they mean, track them over time, and use them in policymaking. The third component of how we're going about Justice Counts is supporting states and agencies in implementing the framework. So again, like the metrics, we can build databases until the cows come home, but unless these are actually utilized by policymakers, there's missing some serious utility there. We have opportunities for 10 states. We call this our Founding States program to receive 12 months of technical assistance in 6 different phases. We have a number of states that have already signed up for this program and some that are really interested in this program that we hope to sign on soon. The 6 phases of technical assistance are an introduction and orientation, so getting agencies, whether those are state or local agencies, around the table and orienting them to what Justice Counts is and how it works. The second is evaluation and assessment. There is an online self-assessment tool already available through our websites, justicecounts.org, that agencies can go on and select their agency name. It will automatically route them to the type of agency that they are, and they can take the self-assessment to understand how their current data collection capacity and analysis capacity stacks up against the metrics. Phase 3 is implementation planning. So this is working closely with state leaders and state associations and others to determine how they want to try to implement this at the state level. Phase 4 is really the meat of the implementation component of the project. That's implementation and intensive TA support. So this is one-time onboarding for agencies that utilize the Justice Counts infrastructure. It's working with state leaders to understand how data literate they are, potentially adding or removing certain metrics based on the priorities of state leaders, and utilizing the flexible nature of the system. Phase 5 is ongoing implementation assistance. We know not all agencies in the state are going to be ready to go with this in the short run, and so this is a sustained period of implementation assistance, again involving us here at CSG, our partners at BJA, and the 21 national partners on the project to help them adopt and utilize this infrastructure. And then finally is sustainability and additional metrics. I talked earlier about a second tier of metrics, tier 2. Those are in development right now. And we want to be able to roll those out to states starting early next year, and hopefully for agencies that have the capacity to adopt and utilize those additional metrics, which are more comprehensive, more nuanced, more detailed in nature, to do so using the existing platform. All right, with that, I will pause. That was quicker than I thought it might be. But Maria, I don't know if you want to facilitate some questions or there are questions in the room.
I'm going to give the opportunity. First of all, I get the speaker. I'm going to give the opportunity. Give the opportunity? Okay. I'm going to give the opportunity to the audience to offer some questions. If not, I've got at least 3 or 4 or 5 that come to mind very easily. So questions from the audience? Yeah, Neil? Bob's coming around, but I'll loan you mine.
Just curious, are you also addressing, the data collection side and governance side of data before you start actually using it for measuring and things like that?
So great question. So Justice Counts, again, is a BJA-funded initiative, not BJS-funded. So we are not a data collection entity. This is a tool for helping states and localities utilize their own data better. A big component of the delivery of TA in each state is to help them designate a governance entity, whether that is a cross-cutting body, for example, a sentencing commission or criminal justice commission or others that can kind of oversee or house a state's justice counts effort. That's one way that we're seeking to address kind of the governance issue. We have a lot of questions from folks around security and statewide definitions and things like that that will definitely come up. As you can see, we have suggested definitions, but this is not a policy-oriented project in that we don't go in and provide, for example, bill language or something like that to state legislators or suggest certain ways of defining, key metrics on a statewide level. We certainly have been part of some of those initiatives in other states in the past, but that is not what we do on the Justice Count side. Again, about leveraging data that is available and hopefully broadly comparable at this stage of the system.
All right, Ben, you might have said it and I missed it, but looking at the Justice Count's website on some of the state data dashboards that are out there,
yes,
it's all corrections data, at least
yes.
right now. Is there a time frame when some of that law enforcement data will be released or published?
Yeah, so great question, Kyle. So one of the components on the Justice Count's website right now is what we call our state data dashboards. Those are a product that we put out last year, more than anything to try to demonstrate the problem statement. How little of these data, we chose 8 key points around corrections, prison population, probation and parole populations, admissions, releases, things like that, to see how many of them were reported publicly by corrections or supervision entities around the country. The results were, I think, exactly what we expected them to be, which is not many. I think there was only one state, shout out North Carolina, who put out all 8 of those metrics on a regular basis. No other state did that, so again, exemplary of the problem statement. As we get states on board and adopting the Justice Counts metrics, we'll create state-specific dashboards for them, and we will eventually down the road create a national dashboard. But the state data dashboard that's available right now is kind of separate and distinct from this component of the project. That's a great question.
Okay, let me just interject 1 or 2 to give it a wider scope. First of all, from the logistics standpoint, you mentioned 6 phases. That's over a period of what?
12 months.
12 months. That's aggressive and eager, so
Yes.
I applaud you and your team for getting that all done. From the examples of the data that's being collected within the correctional component, give us an operational example of how they would be using it, meaning when they get access to their state dashboard, they're only seeing what's happened in their state. Are they able to compare and contrast to those other participating states? Do you envision, maybe not in that first phase, but do you envision what might be some analytics that will be available to them?
We do. So in the short run, getting agencies on board is more technical in nature, and I think doing a lot of engaging directly with agency leaders, with policymakers, kind of building support for the project within a state, making folks aware of what this is and how it works, and then getting them to actually adopt the infrastructure. So we see it being a number of months down the road before anybody is actually putting data into the database. It's going to depend, Maria, on how far along other states are and how open or willing they are to allow states access to their dashboards. Eventually, we do envision a national dashboard that does, again, facilitate that type of interstate comparison, although, again, we're very weary of the definitional issues there. I think a lot of it is just we're going to have to see how many participating entities kind of override and utilize their own definitions, and where those data really are comparable or really are not comparable.
Absolutely, and the audience should know that Ben and I have started conversations, we and the team have started the conversations of how is it that IGIS can be one of those listed partners on the slides, right? Partly because of the phase definition, partly because of some housekeeping issues. I think that the future then enables what might be connectivity, not from the technical perspective, but from the data access perspective, from the governance perspective, somebody asked about that, from the maybe helping connection to industry members, as well as then the data usage at the operational level. So I say that only to say nothing is off the table, but certainly suggestions from the group would definitely be welcome as to where the IGIS community might be able to better support or enhance the team that Ben has brought together.
Yeah, Ben,
Yes,
as I just want everybody to know that the CGIS committee stood up a new work group yesterday, and Ben has been requested to participate in that, so we'll be able to engage justice counts into the work that we're doing at the committee level, which we're really thrilled about as well.
Thanks, Bob.
So he wasn't in the room and then he got drafted, was that the deal?
I got
So you're-
voluntold that I'd be part of
Exactly.
this.
You
That's
got
fine.
voluntold, you're exactly right.
That's fine.
So tell me from knowing that this is a little bit of a sales job for you, every time you go to a different state.
Sure.
You're educating the stakeholders, you're probably going to the SAA at the first level, and then you're engaging probably the state level agency?
Correct.
Or are you recruiting what are the locals as well, or thinking that that is something that they will in turn carry to the locals?
Yeah, great question, Maria. So we're going to be highly deferential to state leaders in terms of how they want to go about that. A state we're working in right now is Nevada. We're working through the Nevada Sentencing Commission, the Nevada Department on Sentencing Policy, which has a statutory charge as kind of a centralized data collection entity. Obviously, there is a state administering agency, that's the Nevada Department of Public Safety. There's a statistical analysis center that actually lives at UNLV. And so we're working with those entities as well to understand the current data landscape in Nevada, kind of which data already flow up from local agencies or county agencies to the state or to the federal government in ways that we might be able to understand or leverage or utilize those existing flows of data. As you can see from the construction here, a lot of this does rely on the participation of local agencies. One of the first things we hear in every state we go is, do you know how many law enforcement agencies we have? Yeah, a couple hundred. We know what a lift that is. We know what a lift it is, and Kyle and I worked together in Missouri a number of years back, 114 counties in St. Louis City. That's a huge lift. But again, we know some of those counties have internal capacity. Some of those counties are already providing some of these data to the state or to the federal government, and there are ways that we can help enhance that capacity and engage those stakeholders, whether that's through state associations or some states are interested in putting forth legislation, which is, again, something we'll steer clear of. I think we're aiming a lot more towards the you get more flies with honey approach here and trying to make this attractive to them as a tool and as a resource for sharing these data with policymakers at the state and local level.
And when you make reference to the infrastructure as being implemented and you're taking care of the tech details, without getting too far into it, because
Sure.
I know that's not your sweet spot, what does that mean? Is this a web portal access issue? Is this a literal box, a server? Is this connectivity to their source systems, or are they re-entering data or at least tallies
Yeah.
into this application?
Great question. So it's a cloud-based platform. There's no hardware involved. I think when we talk about onboarding an agency to this, that means getting on the phone with either their IT or their researcher or someone at the vendor, which is going to be a really key connection for us later on, since so many agencies share vendors and they may have different types of systems, but they're broadly similar. And if I have somebody in a small sheriff's agency and I do not know how to run a crystal report in the system that we have that would pull these data, well, somebody 2 counties over has the same system as me, and they do know how to do it, right? So they can either walk me through it. A lot of it is kind of creating networks and resources and infrastructure for agencies to participate in that, but there's no physical component. That could probably mean them getting on the phone with someone from CSG or someone from Recidivis and saying, here is the interface, here is how it is used, here's the data that we're looking for from you, based on what you all collect, what you trust, what you don't. here's how we would recommend that you go about this. We're trying at all costs to avoid agencies having to go through and do manual tallies or manual entry, although we know that's where some of them are going to be, or at least going to start. And so again, that's where these relationships with vendors and other folks who understand the various systems and which talk to each other and which in all likelihood don't, to help us unpack those dynamics on a state-to-state level.
And I'm sorry for hogging the mic here, but one more question that comes to mind is, from your experiences so far, the vendors or the service providers that you're working with, are they the database administrators? Are they the case management system suppliers? Are they the IT guys from the state that then are pulling it from different sources? Or what's your experience so far?
Yes.
Yes,
all of the above.
That's what I figured. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't even all the examples, but okay.
States want to do this differently. So in some states that we're working with, they want to be highly centralized in the way that they go about it. They want to put a state entity in charge of kind of coordinating and clearing and reviewing the data that go into the system. Other states say, have at it. Go out and engage the counties, go out and engage the sheriffs, engage the police chiefs, work through the associations to get what you can get. And feel free to engage directly with the vendors and talk about kind of what this would entail, and whether that is building a part of their system that enables these metrics to be pulled and reported automatically, or it links automatically, or it's just providing direct assistance to the agency to say, hey, here's how you run this report and enter these information. We've seen all of the above, various different approaches.
There's very little doubt that the IGIS community, the team, would have a lot to offer on the technical side, on the data sharing side, even on the facilitation with the providers that you're working with, so that the one-off agencies could yield the benefit to other agencies that they have a footprint at, right? So whether it's within the same state, whether it's across states, depending upon the similarity of either the solutions or the versions or all of those issues that we've dealt with in the past. So there's a lot for us to chat about. From a roadmap perspective, Ben, realizing that CSG and your group in particular and BJA have invested a lot in this by way of effort and funds, et cetera. Do you have visibility that you might be able to share with regard to what you see as next steps for the program from a national perspective that you could share?
Sure. Yeah, great question, Maria. And just let me clarify that CSG and BJA co-lead this effort, but it is entirely BJA funded.
Yeah.
This is entirely federally funded.
Your skin in the game, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much the case. So this, like every federal grant, was written, I think, in 2019, released in 2020. There was a supplemental appropriation, and then every 3 years we get releases for recompetes for this project. We think the future of this project at the federal level is really bright. There is certainly a ton of support within BJA. We have seen support from BJS and NIJ as well, OJP leadership in particular, and support among members of Congress that fund this work. And so we think that the future is hopefully long and bright. Again, we've got opportunities for 10 states right now, and there was a funded opportunity earlier this year for an additional 15 states to participate, so really looking for national buy-in. What portion of that is available for additional partnerships or to bolster our current partnerships, that is not information that I have right now. But yeah, I think there is, the intent here is only to grow this program. And again, it's not a federal data collection initiative. It doesn't aim to replace BJS or do what BJS does. It doesn't aim to replace or do what NIJ does. It is about helping states and localities better leverage, utilize, and understand the data that already exists for them. And we think that's a message that resounds and needs a lot of partnership and a lot of support across the country.
The sad reality is that the problem is big enough that we can all
Oh, yeah.
contribute to the solution. And,
Yep,
and that's
absolutely.
partly because the problem is huge and partly because the issues are many. Bob,
Absolutely.
you have a question back there?
Yes, I did. Ben, you mentioned the areas of law enforcement, prosecution, defense, corrections, so forth.
Yes, sir.
Is there any one of those that's like you're really connecting with, and one of those that's sort of lagging behind, or does that vary by state?
I think it varies a little bit by state, Bob, just by the very nature of corrections and being larger and more centralized. I think there's 55-something corrections agencies, one per state in D.C. and FBOP and others. They tend to be a little bit more consistent and have a lot more maybe experience in working together around, these are the things that we collect and analyze within our systems. Now, NIBRS has really helped that on the law enforcement front. Obviously, putting out the NIBRS, or release and adoption of the NIBRS system over the last 10 to 15 years has certainly helped that as well, although we've got a long way to go with NIBRS adoption. A couple of areas, prosecution and defense in particular, are not accustomed to collecting or reporting a lot of data. They operate case management systems that are not designed for research or the collection of quantitative data, and so coming up with those metrics and kind of getting our heads around those systems and approaches has definitely been tricky. Now, there's been support from a number of DAs and prosecutors, public defenders, private defense counsel that have participated in the project and say, we need data to justify our request for additional prosecutors, requests for additional DAs, or their caseloads is another big one that comes up a lot with them. But it's difficult because they're just not accustomed to that type of data collection and analysis.
Is the lead agency in each state for this effort the same agency, or is it different?
It's different. It's different. So, for example, in Nevada, we're working with the Nevada DOC, but they do not oversee probation and parole. There is Nevada probation and parole, which is under the auspices of the Department of Public Safety, and so NPP and NDOC have to, both obviously provide data and be critical components of the project. That's the same across the country. Some DOCs are big and have a lot of control and authority. Some states already have a good deal of data streams going to their statistical analysis center or some other statewide component that we could potentially leverage, and their lift would be a little bit easier. But generally, it's a state-by-state approach.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? One more.
I hit my limit, I guess. You mentioned NIBRS, you opened my door a little bit here.
Yes, sir.
So the question is, since most law enforcement, I'd say, at least at the state level, you mentioned arrest by race and arrest by gender, two of the law enforcement metrics. Those are probably already publicly available through some sort of state NIBRS release. If that's the case, do you still need the state's permission then to use that data in justice counts if it's already publicly available somewhere through that state?
Yeah, great question, Kyle. So I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. The data dashboards that you referenced earlier in your question were based entirely off of public data, which obviously we can go get. I think we want to do this project in very close coordination and with the complete support of state leaders. And so the safer route there would be to say, we want to pull these public data down from these sources. Are you okay with that? And so that would be certainly our preferred route. Again, this is the honey over vinegar approach here. So. Yeah, it's a really great question. One of the areas we are focused on in this effort is getting data that is more timely, i.e. is provided to this system, hopefully after only a couple of weeks. And we've had a lot of researchers who come to us who say, my data needs time to settle. Things get wrong, things get inputted incorrectly, we don't know the resolution of a case within a given period. And so there's some lag there, and we certainly understand that. But those are, important. The timeliness aspect of it is important. The reliability aspect of it is important as well.
Wonderful. Any last questions? All right, Kyle, that was your last opportunity.
Third, Kyle?
Ben, we can't thank you enough.
Of course.
This provides us visibility to yet another national initiative that truly has huge potential, not only to address what was originally deemed as supporting the reform movement, the justice reform movement, but truly is fundamental in the data sharing process, the policy issues, the operational response issues. So I just look forward to be part of the table with you, whatever that means, however we can help the process. But in the meantime, we thank you very much for your time today.
Great. Thanks, Maria. Thank you, everyone.